So let's chat about Concord real quick.
Concord.
So Concord is now technically out. It came out earlier last week, in like a sort of limited. They called it early access, but like it's kind of what like Microsoft has done for a long time, where it's like you can pay a bit extra and get to play the game for like 3 days earlier or whatever.
Nice.
But it came out proper on Friday. Player numbers have not been great. We were chatting about this earlier, but like just before we started recording, there was just over 200 people on Steam playing, and it peaked on launch day, not in the early access period, at 680 around there, which is, I mean, for a multiplayer shooter, only multiplayer, it is pretty horrendous.
Yeah.
That's like worst case scenario for your sort of game at launch, because launch is when you're going to grab attention. You know what I mean?
And
I think it's a pity. Yeah,
I was going to say it's on PlayStation as well. Don't know what the player numbers look like there, but
like I was saying, even if it's 10 times more, it's not great.
Yeah.
Like you want to get out of the gate with like 20, 30,000, you know, especially nowadays in the current climate. I mean, we were talking about, we haven't played it, either of us, but Black Myth Wukong has got like almost 2 million players, and that's a single player game. It's nuts, you know. Maybe a bad comparison, because that game is having it's an outlier in that regard, but still, you know, for a multiplayer game, this is not fantastic. By comparison, the Marvel's Rivals beta, when it was out, was attracting like 50, 60,000 people on Steam alone, and that was a beta. So that gives you an idea of what people are gravitating towards. I think it's a shame, because despite some pretty negative initial impressions, like the training mode in Concord, I think is pretty bad. It doesn't explain the nuances of a lot of characters really well. And the very first character you get put in control of is one of the game's tanks, and the tanks move so slowly in this game. I think it's something that needs to be tweaked. They just move so much slower than the rest of the characters, who are sometimes extremely nimble, and it just feels very out of place. So like those first bad impressions aside, I think this is a pretty competent and interesting shooter with like interesting ideas, even if the amount of content on offer isn't really that exciting. And because it's underpinned by the lack of players, like you end up in the situation where queuing for games becomes way more of a chore than it should be. I'm talking about queuing like close to 10 minutes for the game's main mode, which is bad.
And then how long does a typical game last?
Not maybe 10 minutes, you know, so it's bad. And you know, if that's the situation at launch and the numbers keep tapering off, it's only going to get worse. So, but like I said, I think it's a bit of a shame, because the game is quite interesting, and I think what it comes down to is just a lack of like cohesive marketing. So just before we were recording, you were like, oh, is this the next hero shooter Overwatch? And you're kind of half right. So it is a hero shooter in that all the characters have specific abilities and take on roles like tanks, healers, damage dealers. They call it different things, but that's essentially what it boils down to. But it is not Overwatch at all. Like there is no escort the convoy to a certain point. There's none of that. Its main mode is actually more akin to a Counter-Strike or Valorant. Actually, you had a good point there, where it's round-based, there's no respawns, and essentially you're either trying to eliminate the enemy team or grab hold of a point in the map for a certain amount of time. So it's like the same dual objectives like in Counter-Strike. It's like rescue the hostages or eliminate the team, or plant the bomb or eliminate the team. And it's very... the rounds are very short generally, and it's all down to like very synergetic team play. But in this one, it's a hero shooter, so you're trying to balance having a tank in your team or a damage dealer or a healer, so that you have a team that synergizes really well. And I think that's quite interesting. I think that's an approach that hasn't really been explored. I know, Overwatch is explored with a lot of different modes and whatever, but the core mode there still is like the escort mode, as it was with like TF2. But this is also not the same sort of Twitch shooter as a Valorant, because it's not trying to copy Overwatch. It's definitely got the loose shooting of it's not trying to copy
Veterans.
Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
It's got the loose shooting of an Overwatch, if that makes sense. So like those ideas are quite cool, and I think it creates this like this environment that has the potential to be something interesting, especially in this mode. It's very hyper competitive. Like the modes outside of here are pretty standard team deathmatch or like Conquest, where there's like 3 points on the map and you're trying to hold them for, you know, an amount of time to like gain points. And I think those modes aren't as fun because like you're respawning all the time and team composition matters far less there.
Yeah.
I think especially in a team deathmatch, like if you're choosing like a healer, you are being absolutely rolled over by most people because teams aren't sticking together. There isn't this like sense of, you know, synergizing with a tank to keep them alive. And also the time to kill is incredibly short. So if you're a healer that doesn't do much damage and you get caught around the corner with a DPS character, you are fucked. Like game over. But in the more round-based mode, I think that's where everything sort of gels. And it's just a pity that that's the mode you have to queue the longest for. Yeah. And that takes, you know, the shortest to complete. So you're constantly in this like play for 10 minutes, queue for 10 minutes, play for 10 minutes, queue for 10. I think I finished maybe 4 games yesterday in the space of an hour, which sucks. That's like really, really shit. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of mechanics that aren't explained super well, which I think contributes to a sense of it's quite overwhelming when you start because you've got firstly like a lot of characters, and a lot of them, unless you jump into like a practice mode with them, their nuances aren't really explained super well by their there's like a little screen you can pull up during the game to see their abilities, but so there's this robot. You didn't play the beta, did you?
No.
So there's this one robot character that a lot of people are talking about in the beta, and he is very confusing. So his main weapon basically sucks in bullets, similar to like a Titanfall where you could grab bullets with like your little Titan robot thing. So you can kind of absorb almost all damage, you know, and in a team context, that's super useful if the people you're playing with understand that. Like any rockets coming at you, any bullets, you just completely suck them up for no damage at all. The only thing is like you have to reload that ability, so you can't just keep that thing, you know, going in perpetuity. But then you've got a second weapon that is like the inverse of that. It does damage. And at first people are like, oh, is your damage proportional to the amount of damage you suck in? I have no idea if that's true because the screen does not specify if that's true. But it does seem like that. I'm not sure. And the rounds don't last long enough for me to like really determine if that's the case. So it's like that's one example of like pretty bad explanation of a character that when I'm playing against someone who fully understands them, they are extremely effective and very, very useful in a team. And I just think if the barrier to entry there is time spent with the game, and then time spent with the game is made difficult by the long queue times, like your patience to really stick with it and really learn its nuances will be tested quite a bit. And I think ultimately that leads to people not wanting to engage with the game super long. It makes me not want to engage with the game super long because I feel like I need to spend a lot of time with this to really understand it. But it is super wasting my time because there is not enough, you know, there's not enough chance to really extract what I want out of the game. So it's a pity. It really is a pity because I think given a different launch window or maybe a different approach to how it's monetized, because this is a paid game, it's a $40 game. And the sort of progression in the game is almost non-existent. It's just cosmetics. There's a whole other thing where you can unlock variants of different characters and then you compose your crew, and it only really makes it only really ties into the game's main like mode where every time you choose a character for a round, you like burn that character so you can't use them again in another round. But if you've got multiples of a character in your crew, then you can choose them multiple times. It's very convoluted. It's interesting, but it's like it only applies to one mode in the game. So it's like it's such a like confusing system just to apply to one mode.
Yeah.
And then if you forget to switch out your crew, you suddenly have like 2 characters you can pick from when you enter a team deathmatch, which is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's good ideas, but I just think like the game was marketed poorly. I don't think $40 is the correct way to approach this game, especially if you want to get people in. Like you compare it to like a Marvel Rivals where they announce like all characters are free, game's free to play. That immediately gets people through the door. I mean, okay, it's also Marvel, so it's got a very big advantage. Like I'm not going to ignore that, but I just don't think there's a lot of business decisions that I think have really overshadowed what is actually a pretty interesting shooter. It's a pity.
It's interesting because I think when Overwatch launched, I mean, I was on that Overwatch hype train, don't get me wrong, but it was an interesting case study as well where Overwatch was a paid-for game, but it still had microtransactions. It was both. And even then, I think it was a sore point for some people, but Overwatch, we saw, like, it launched super successful. But when they launched Overwatch 2, that was also, it was this back and forth of like, no, it's a paid expansion, it's a this, it's a that, and it went free to play. I think in 2024, like, unless you've got, I don't know, an Overwatch or Valorant or whatever killer, like you have to be so confident in your game to put it out and slap a $40 price tag on it. Like, sorry, like it's just, I mean, there's a reason I also look at it and I immediately go like, oh, this is just like an Overwatch clone. I know nothing about the game. It is the wrong take, 100%. But if I'm the average consumer and I've done no Googling whatsoever, I see this, I go like, I'm not going to pay $40 for this. Like, why would I, when I could play any other shooter that's free? Marvel Rivals is coming 100%. In December. It's going to cost me nothing to play it. Why would I commit $40 to a game that just kind of, could be the same as any of the other games that I can play for free? And it's sad.
You're also trying to steal the mindshare from so many other free-to-play juggernauts out there. Like
it's the same. I'll say the same for. I played a good example is X Defiance. Came out, Ubisoft's own shooter that came out this year. It's a very good game, free to play. I played it. I absolutely love it, but I just cannot commit that much time to it. Now, what does that say for the average Call of Duty player or the average Valorant player who X Defiance is obviously trying to capitalize on? There's just not enough time for all these ongoing games.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a reason.
And then you couple that with a $40 price tag. It's like almost a no-brainer. Like what would attract people to this that would justify that cost? I mean, you brought up Overwatch. I think Overwatch is a good example of being, firstly, like launched in a very different space. When you think about Overwatch, Fortnite didn't exist. PUBG
no,
didn't
for
exist.
Sure. That's why I said it was an interesting thing in that it was paid for and it had microtransactions. That it just would never.
And they got away
today.
with it, like 100%. I mean, they also had the benefit of Blizzard. Blizzard is a name. People, and the concept of like hero shooters wasn't saturated at that point. No. Like people wanted something similar to TF2, and Team Fortress 2 had launched more than a decade before then. So I think it launched in a very different space, and you hit the nail on the head with like Overwatch 2 tried to recapitalize on that, and they failed like completely. Like it went free to play because the pay aspect didn't work out there, and even then, like the content on offer, there was a much higher expectation on the amount of time it could steal from you, and it hasn't worked out. Like Overwatch 2 does not exist in the same sort of mindshare that Overwatch 1 did. Like not even close.
Not, no.
And it just indicative of like the market is different. And I think Concord is trying to be a game in a market that disappeared 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's its biggest problem.
I want to ask, how long has this game been in development for?
So that's a tricky one because like there was a tweet that came out earlier this week from one of the developers, and he was basically like, Sham again. It's like so happy, so proud of the game coming out, and he was basically like, the game's been in development for 8 years. I've been here for 5 of those, and people are like, whoa, 8 years, like. So again, like in development for 8 years is very subjective. Like, what does that mean? Was it in pre-production for that time? Was it just in planning? Was it in active development? Every studio determines those things by their own accord. There's no like standard for that.
Yeah.
But like Sony purchased the studio for this game. Like this was part of their push for games as a service, and Firesprite was purchased because Sony saw this game and they were like, this would be good for our portfolio. So firstly, this is not Sony shoving an idea onto a studio, as so many people think is the case. But like for Sony to look at this and be like, yes, this is definitely going to drive our idea of games as a service and really, you know, put us in a good position there, is just a complete misunderstanding of that market. And it's not the first time we've seen it. Like The Last of Us 2 Factions got cancelled. Bungie is in the weirdest space right now. And a lot of their games as a service pushes have just not worked out, because I think the space is just, it's so hard to penetrate now, and throwing money at the problem is not going to work.
And I'd also argue, like, let's say this, even if it was in development 5 years ago, the gaming space was a lot different. I mean, I can't, I mean, obviously Fortnite existed, Overwatch existed, but I mean, think of 5 years ago versus today. There's just too much to choose from. There's way too many shooters to choose from. And then, I mean, this is not at all in the same kind of space, but Valve are now launching, they're like doing something with Deadlock. It's there. It's like shadow launching.
Game,
you can't talk about it.
Concord could not have accidentally launched at the wrong time.
Yeah, like, it's just such a weird thing. It's sad, because I do think, sorry to harp on the point, like 5 years ago or even 8 years ago when this is being spoken of, I'm sure it was very innovative, like, holy shit, we've got a good idea here, but maybe it just took too long to develop and now it's too late.
Yeah.
But it's at a point where you kind of have to put it out. You've put spent 7 years developing it. Like, what is another year?
It's a sunk cost fallacy. Like, you have to put it out there. Someone actually, I can't remember where I saw this, but they likened it to Ubisoft's Skull and Bones, where that was just in the oven for so long. And when it launched, it just seemed like it completely misunderstood. Like, multiplayer only game just ships. Like, who is going to play this? But at some point, it's like, Ubisoft has spent so much money getting this out the door, they just eventually have to just put it out there. Like, it does not matter. They need to get this from a financial perspective, making some sort of recuperation on money back. And I think what is terrifying is that Skull and Bones, sorry, not Black Flag. That's the Assassin's Creed that it's based off of. Skull and Bones had a better launch than Concord.
Don't even say it.
Which actually, I want to check, because Skull and Bones came out on Steam this week.
I did it. That's what it launched on Steam. That's Steam interesting, because it's funny you mentioned that while you're looking that up. I saw a tweet just yesterday where it was essentially a Ubisoft served to me tweet or something where it said Skull and Bones Season 3. And I went, I forgot that game existed. But it does exist. So this is Skull and Bones right now. Has 4 times more players playing than Concord. I mean, its peak is also double. It's not really a huge milestone, but that's the point. It's like Skull and Bones is hitting 1,000 players on Steam. This is a game has been out for a while, so okay, maybe different. But again, like, this is a game that people might have already purchased on PC and definitely on console. This is just its debut on Steam, period. So these are all new players, and it's got double the amount of Concord players than at launch. Yeah, so sad. It's not good. Like, and I just wonder what that means for the future of Concord, because, like, we've seen this before from Sony where they've pivoted very quickly to, like, a free-to-play thing, but that game doesn't lend itself to free-to-play. There's nothing there to monetize free-to-play except cosmetics. And, like, if people really aren't into the game itself, making it free with paid cosmetics isn't going to change much, I don't think. No. Yeah, but it's interesting, because I think I completely hear you. Like, I know you can't just pivot and suddenly you're a free-to-play game. But I have to think that as a Sony or the studio, you go, like, we're just not getting the player numbers we expected. We need to spend the next 6 months figuring out a battle pass or something. Like, we go free-to-play. If I could, we go We need to figure out a way to just get the numbers in, because then it is like, oh, I mean, I've got access to review copy, like, don't get me wrong. But if I were the average consumer, I would maybe be tempted to try it because I'm like, well, it costs me nothing. Like, what?
That's true. It just costs you an hour or two of your time to see if it's worthwhile.
Is it worth my time? Oh, it's actually, like, I can download some free cosmetics. Oh, but there's a battle pass. It's like, it's $10. Like, I'll buy the first season. I mean, that's enough to just get the ball rolling. But I don't know.
It's true.
It's a difficult
It's less
thing.
of a barrier to entry because now it's fighting for time and your money, whereas free-to-play is only fighting for potentially your time.
And then hopefully some of your money. Yeah, I don't know.
I think the worst aspect of this launch is that it's not the fact that it's bad. Like, we can recognize it's bad from the player numbers. I think it's the fact that no one cares. Like, there is not any talk, negative or positive, of this game online.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. Like, when you think of games that have had like massive redemption stories, when you think of a No Man's Sky, maybe
what a story.
But slightly different because that game was hyped to hell and back. So when it came out, a lot of people purchased it, which meant a lot of people very quickly started being like, this is not the game that we were thinking it was going to be or what was promised. But people were still talking about it. People knew what No Man's Sky was. People, so when No Man's Sky became good, it was very easy to be like, oh, this game is good again, and people know what you're talking about. If you wait a year from now and you go, Concord is going free to play, I bet you people will be like, what's Concord?
100%.
Like, and that's a worse problem to have.
Yeah.
So I just don't, even from a redemption standpoint, I don't understand how it comes back from this without like a full-on relaunch. But even then, like a good example, there was a game revealed during the Gamescom one night only or whatever that used a lot of assets, or basically is the revival of the game Paragon, the other Epic and Sony sort of exactly my point.
Wow.
What is Paragon?
Yeah, no,
it was
the
their
name
sort
rings
of
a bell,
MOBA thing.
But
it was their like MOBA that lasted for like 6 months and also paid. And then they took it offline and made all the assets of the game free. So another studio picked them up and is basically like remaking the game with a different name.
Wow.
But you're exactly the point. Like, you are in the space where you are more aware of these things than 90% of people playing games, and you didn't even know what Paragon was.
Yeah.
And it had a very similar launch, like very under the radar. People didn't play it, and it got silently shut down like very quickly after that. And I could see that happening to Concord.
Was Paragon Cliffy B's game? No. He also had a game that
was
like,
an Epic Games sort of thing with Sony. It only came out on PS5 and the Epic Games Store.
But Cliffy B also had a game that quietly launched and just
Lawbreakers.
What happens in Lawbreakers?
Also a paid one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that game had buzz, hey? That game had Cliffy B attached to it. It previewed really well. I played that at E3. I thought it was great. It was a hero shooter, so people already then were like, do we need another hero shooter? This and that. It also had very interesting ideas about like movement and the flow of gameplay, and that game did not work like at all.
Yeah. Wild. Absolutely wild. That's
I mean, I feel really bad for the developers, but at the same time, this is the reality of the marketplace, and to be ignorant that this could have happened is just insane to me. Like, I cannot believe that anyone in that studio, and I don't think this is the case, but I don't think anyone there is like surprised by this. You know what I mean? So it's a bummer. It really is, and I think the eventuality is going to be the studio is going to suffer as a consequence, and I think that sucks. So,
100%. Sony turns around and says, you did not deliver. It's like, well...
Unfortunately, it's the Bungie problem again. It's like, what do you do now with the studio?
If only somebody could have told Sony that 1 million microtransaction live games was not the right move to make. If only... Who only there was some way to know... That was
Who knew
a bad
that trying to make 4 games that required the sole focus of all the players for one of them would not work out? Like, come on.
It's just insanity.
Not even Fortnite makes that mistake. Like, Epic understands that they can't make another games as a service game.
Yeah.
Because like they would be directly competing with themselves, So I don't know what Sony was expecting from that sort of strategy.
I don't know. It's just sad. Anyways, that is Concord.